Welcome back to the Skiff. I told you we're going to talk about World War III, and we got the guy to do it. I'm going to bring in Brandon Weichert. My friend, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
Well, I called you late last night, and you were good enough to come on last minute. I really appreciate it, man.
Sure
And
thing.
but when I saw the Ben Gurion attack and all of this going on in some of your posts, I said I got to get this guy on because you get what's happening.
Yeah.
My first reaction was that this was some kind of false flag to get the war kicked off. I mean, what do you think?
It's so funny. I didn't even think of that. The reason I didn't think of that is because I know for a fact that the Houthis have what's known as the Palestine 2, a hypersonic weapon. It is a derivative of Iran's hypersonic weapon, the Fatah 1, which itself was handed over to the Iranians by the Russians, which is based on the very advanced Russian hypersonic weapons. So the Russians have multiple different, versions of these things, and they've been feeding it to the Iranians, who've been feeding it to the Houthis, and we know the Chinese are helping the Houthis target American warships in the Red Sea with satellites.
Yeah.
So I didn't even go, but of course this could very well be, but I don't think that's what it is. I mean, you had Ansar Allah, which is the actual name of the Houthis. Their people came out and said, we did this. It was a hypersonic weapon. And the Israelis delayed responding to that until several hours later, the IDF spokesman came out and said, well, the reason we didn't intercept it was because there was a mechanical issue with our air defense system, which is a bunch of bollocks, as my British friends would say. No, what happened was the no air defense system in the West, either Israeli or in the United States or Europe, has the capacity to stop a hypersonic weapon, which is exactly why I didn't even think of false flag, because I thought, well, we know the Houthis have this system, and the Houthis have been threatening to use it on the Israelis. They've held back thus far, but now this is all happening on the eve of this Israeli offensive into Gaza.
I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so this is all timed. And the reason this is happening now the Houthis are saying they're going to do an air blockade with these hypersonic missiles. Right. They're going to prevent any aircraft from entering or taking off from Israeli airports. This is a big deal, but this is all about not just Gaza, but this is all about Iran. And they're trying to put the squeeze on Israel and by extension the U.S. to not strike Iran. And I actually don't think Trump really wants to strike Iran. So this is maybe some fuel for his fire to go diplomatic as opposed to, full on war.
Well, he came out with that this morning, and let me see if I can find that, if I have the right clip. Anyway, he said that I have it on CDM, but he said look, this is all Iran, and if it doesn't stop, it's going to be really bad for Iran. And then Netanyahu came out afterward and said, yeah, I agree with Trump. It's going to be really bad for Iran. So I thought of you again, like these guys are serious about popping off this war, man.
I don't know if Trump is, though. I don't know how to say this because I am a supporter of Israel, but we all know that Israel has a massive amount of influence over our congressional system. We know that Trump right now has got to get this, what he calls big, beautiful tax deal through Congress. And it's more than a tax deal. It's basically pushing as much MAGA type legislation through in one sitting as possible. But if he doesn't help the Israelis, or at least appear to be, he can't get that through because Congress will gridlock him because of the influence of AIPAC. And so my working assumption right now is he certainly has advisors who want him to go in hard, but I actually think Trump is doing a bit of, rope-a-dope right now, where he's trying to placate the pro-Israeli faction, and he's trying to also placate the MAGA faction, which doesn't want war, all while trying to get his domestic agenda through. Because Trump does know if he goes into a war right now, his domestic agenda is over forever, and there's no coming back from that. So
I would say his presidency is over. If he attacks Iran, I think it's done. I mean,
it's over. Yeah. Because what's going to happen is, and we talked about this a little last time I was on, again, I'm not a fan of the Iranian regime. I would love to see it go away, but there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it. And the way
Yep.
not to do it is the way that we seem to want to do it, which is we bomb them and we just say, hey, good luck. The problem is there's going to be second and third order effects that will ensnare the Americans. And so, I mean, this is classic Middle East politics. It's a quicksand. It's geopolitical quicksand over there. And so the best way for Trump to get his agenda through domestically is to not get ensnared at all. But Netanyahu very badly wants to get the Americans. And I just add this. This is why I didn't think it was a false flag also.
Okay.
The Israelis, their plan to attack Iran in October of last year, you remember after Assad fell, the Israelis pushed into Syria and created an air corridor linking their airspace over Syria and northern Iraq into northern Iran. The Israelis launched an airstrike against Iran in October that took out a handful of S-300 air defense systems in Iran. But that was supposed to be the beginning of a much larger air campaign. And something happened to force the Israelis to pull back, and it wasn't American pressure. What I have been told by people in the U.S. intelligence community is that the Israelis got into Iranian airspace. They did clip those 5 or 6 Russian-built air defense systems, but then they got a sense of the area, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, the Iranians have way more sophisticated air defenses than what we thought they had."
You
and
know, electronically, they could pick up some of the signals of what.
Yes, yeah, and they just could tell there was more systems in place than what they thought, and so they pulled back from that larger strike, and they never went back in. They haven't been back in since really October of last year. Yet they keep saying we can go in whenever we want. Well, we know in the intervening period of time, Russia has plied Iran with increasing levels of not only sophisticated air defenses, but also with increasingly more sophisticated missiles. And that's to say nothing of the support that China is providing Iran. So any airstrike that Israel tries to do on Iran without U.S. support is not going to work, and they're ultimately going to have to rope the Americans in. And that's where the complications come in.
Well, that's exactly what they're trying to do. You know,
Yes.
even Bannon's coming out against Netanyahu saying this is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
So, you know, they have been in Gaza for what, 2 years? And that's right next to Israel. They said, the Israeli government said there's 40,000 militants still there. 40% of the tunnels are still there. After 2 years, so you think a foreign country way over across the continent where you don't know what's underground, you're going to be able to subdue this regime with a few airstrikes?
That's right. That's right. Well, it is a joke. And here's the thing. Netanyahu got caught with his britches down on October 7th, 2023. Okay. Now he has avoided having to politically pay the price for that. And that is partly because he has kept his population distracted by constantly doubling down and expanding on the war for the last.
Have you noticed? Let me interject. Every time he has to go into court, something happens.
Exactly. Well, this is the old Clinton maneuver, right? When Bill Clinton was being impeached, he'd bomb, an aspirin factory in Nigeria, or he'd bomb, Iraqi suspected WMD sites. That was the whole Operation Desert Fox in '98. So, and it was timed with the Lewinsky impeachment. So this is classic politician. Ultimately, we all have to remember politicians are the same everywhere. Okay, it's not a personal thing against Netanyahu. He's doing what you would expect a politician, unfortunately, to do in any country. But the problem for Netanyahu is Israel's a very small country, and it is in a very nasty neighborhood, and there's only so much that technology can give in terms of giving an edge to the Israeli fighting force. There's only so much that can be done. And what has happened is Netanyahu has not only doubled down, but then he's expanded and opened up multiple fronts. He's got like 5 or 6 fronts going. The IDF cannot handle this. They
just called up 60,000 troops, right? Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. And that's not enough for what they want to do. And there's another thing. I have an article pending at the National Interest. I don't know if it's going to get published, but basically I break down the Gaza operation, and they're getting ready to go in. And my argument is, if you remember, up until 2 weeks before they actually went in the first time after October 7th, the talking point was this is going to be an Israeli style Fallujah attack. And they were bringing in U.S. Marines to advise the IDF on who had fought in the second Battle of Fallujah. Hey, this is what you're going to have to expect. Within a few weeks of that operation starting, though, no plan survives contact with the enemy.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
This is a special report.
Knowing how to invest your money is harder than ever before. Dealing with stock market volatility, record debt, and terrorist attacks requires new thinking. At U.S. Asset Management, we can help you see the world more clearly so that you can move beyond the chaos and invest with confidence. Call us, visit us online, or drop by our office. U.S. Asset Management, helping you make better decisions with your money.
In a few weeks of that plan being enacted, the Israelis could not do it. They could not pull off the Fallujah style door to door. We're going to hunt everybody down one at a time. So they had to pull back and they started flattening Gaza. And the reason they're doing the bombardment of Gaza is not because they're trying to ethnically cleanse. I'm sure there are some Zionists who want that, but that's not the majority reason. There's a very strategic reason. It's because their initial Fallujah style campaign failed. So now they've gone Stalingrad. And, this is why they're having to keep going back in.
Standing.
That's right.
Have nowhere to hide kind of
That's
thing.
right. And the problem is that now that has engendered the world against, at least the developing world, against them. And that's actually empowered Russia and China to stand more strongly with their great enemy in Iran. And nobody's talking about, by the way, the introduction of Turkey into this whole equation. I'm the only one that I know who's talking about this, because Turkey's a much bigger threat, in my opinion, to Israel than Iran presently is.
So, I think I said this last time, but I have no problem. I have friends in Israel. We interview generals here all the time. We had General Cooper Wasser on recently. We had Yifa Segal, the chief of staff of the Israeli ambassador.
Right.
My point is, they can fight and fight for their country all they want, but
that's right.
Don't send our boys and girls over there to do it for you.
And by the way, we do have U.S. forces on the ground. That is a fact. It is not advertised, obviously, and they've been on the ground since October 7th. My point here is, and this is where my colleague Dr. Michael Scheuer comes in, and I spoke with him recently, and he reminded me of a quote he gave in 2005, and he said, "Look, no country has a right to survive." He said a country has a right to defend its right to survive. Mm-hmm. But that means that, you've got to not only have the political will to do it, but you have to be smart about how, especially if you're a small country surrounded by bigger enemy countries like Israel is, you've got to be smart about the plays you're making. Gaza, you had to do something about Gaza because they're the ones who attacked you, Hamas and Gaza. So that makes sense. But expanding into Syria, expanding against Iran, threatening to go into the Houthis, Yemen, which is beyond ridiculous, trying to pick a fight with Hezbollah. Hezbollah's leadership was decapitated, absolutely, and that was a brilliant move by the Israeli intelligence, and that they should get all the accolades they deserve for that. It was brilliant. That's a textbook example of how we should be handling terrorism for the future going forward. But the problem is that only does so much. It's a massive paramilitary force. They've got a lot of battlefield experience in Hezbollah, which is based in Lebanon to the north. They are directly supported by Iran. That support has weakened because of Assad's fall, but the Hezbollah is very much still a serious threat. This narrative that's out there that, well, they're no longer a problem. No, what happened was Netanyahu had to end the war as soon as the pager operation happened, because had it gone on the way it was, they were going to lose to Hezbollah the way they lost in 2006. And if you talk to any Israeli military official offline, like I have done, they will admit that the 2006 war against Hezbollah was not a running success like their media people say it was.
Well, Lebanon's always, it's not gone well for them in Lebanon.
No.
It has this time, at least on paper.
Well, that's because they pulled back and they clipped the leadership. That was smart. And then Netanyahu realized I can't fight them while I've got 40 to 50,000 fighters in Hamas down south, and I'm trying to do stuff against Syria. So Netanyahu had to back off, and he had to spin it like this is a win. It wasn't really a win. They degraded Hezbollah's leadership to a point, but I would argue the leadership has probably already been reconstituted.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, and furthermore, the same thing with Hamas. They did degrade their capabilities to some degree, but nowhere near enough to feel secure. And frankly, the whack-a-mole strategy is not going to work. It never does.
Well, you can understand the Israeli effort to control Congress and to, get us into the war because their backs against the wall. But that doesn't mean it's
Absolutely.
okay with us, right?
Right.
I mean, that just
Well, and
doesn't mean
also,
it's.
I wish that people in Israel, in the government, would talk to people like myself who do support their capability to survive, but is also, we're not Israel first. It's you
Yeah.
have to, if you're dependent on on the United States for strategic assistance, and the U.S. is willing to lend it. You also have to understand there's going to be a limit to what we can do. And furthermore,
At some point, yeah.
right, and set aside even that. The fact of the matter is, when Trump took over, the cupboards were bare. Okay.
Yeah.
Our arsenal is depleted. We don't have a defense industrial base to replenish them. They were talking about the terminal high altitude air defense system as being potentially, there was a technical problem with it. Maybe they were saying, no, the problem is the THAAD system that we gave them is probably our most advanced air defense system around. And yet even the THAAD system cannot stop a hypersonic missile. And now the Houthis and the Iranians know the Israelis can't stop hypersonic weapons, even with U.S. help. Guess what? That's what we're going to flood the zone with now. And they've got plenty of those systems in spades, both in Yemen, but also in Iran.
Well, it's very concerning for the U.S. Navy in the Red Sea, too. I mean,
we're going to lose a carrier at this point. I mean, you want to talk about the end of Trump's presidency? If he loses a carrier, which he's going to at very soon, if he loses a carrier, that's World War III, because we're going to go after the people who did it, and then we're going to find out the Chinese helped to target it. Then we're going to find out that the missiles were actually really given by Russia, and then that's going to spiral out of control. Goodbye, MAGA at home. There's going to be no MAGA agenda. The reforms will not be put in place. We will continue on our decline, and this will speed it up. And then Trump will be
the whole agenda that they're trying to push.
I think that is. I think ensnaring him. Remember, this was the agenda with COVID, right? They got him. They got him with COVID in the first term. They prevented his reelection. They used COVID to basically manipulate everything in 2020 against him, and they were effective. And now here we are again. They can't use a pandemic again because that's a little too on the nose. So now they're trying to gin up World War III, and they're probably going to get what they want unless Trump pulls U.S. forces back and he says, I'm not getting in the middle of this.
Great advice. Can you stay for one more segment, Brandon?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.